Hello and welcome. You're watching another episode of Magna Indica with me, Devika Chopra. I have Rishabh back with us in the studio. Rishabh, it's just been Diwali week, and we have another very interesting segment that you've come up with for this episode. Um, as we know, Diwali, we've all celebrated it as children in our homes. We've grown up, we've heard the stories, and we've also seen, in a way, how Diwali has spread and become a global festival in recent times. What a lot of people don't perhaps know about or understand is the extent to which the whole idea of a Lord Ram actually existed in the world. So, because it's been Diwali week, let's take our viewers through what is it that you found.
Devika, the genesis of this conversation is that, I was going through some, friends who live in other parts of the world and they're celebrating Diwali. Now, you understand the concept because they are Indians who, maybe the second generation, third generation Indians who are living in the UK. Rishi Sunak is celebrating Diwali because, of course, he's a second generation Indian.
Hmm.
So you understand people of an ethnic Indian origin celebrating Diwali. Okay. And the Diwali is coming in a context. This is a time when a couple of months from now, we will be inaugurating the grand temple of Ram in Ayodhya. Now, the thing is, there is a lot of conversation about Hinduism, about Ram Rajya. The reality is, we sitting here in India, forget in other parts of the world, we ourselves don't understand what this Hinduism, Ram Rajya, Indic civilization really is. Because your definition of an Indian diaspora and to put it into a religious ethnicity, a Hindu diaspora would be the Rishi Sunaks, who are the second generation Hindus who are celebrating Diwali. Now, we've done these conversations on television that
Yes.
the Ramayana is performed in Cambodia, in Laos, in Bali, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Hong Kong. So, what is this Indic civilization? So, I had some friends of mine who were not Indians, ethnic Thais. They're not second, third generation Indians, that there were some Gujaratis or Tamils or Punjabis who were living in Thailand and they happen to be celebrating Diwali. No, ethnic Thais doing puja to Lord Ganesh.
Yes.
And then forget the history books and the archaeology and all the other things that you can draw the linkages with. This is living and breathing, that you can see that these are people of a completely different ethnicity who have such same cultural roots that in common parlance, in daily parlance, it would be recognizable to you and me. And I thought that is worth conversing in this episode of Magna Indica.
So, Rishabh, like you said, we've spoken about this earlier a bit on our channel, and those recordings are there, of course, on YouTube for people to actually go back and watch. This was around the time when the Ram Mandir was in fact announced, when we, went into the, like I said, the extent of the impression of Lord Ram across the world, and how so many cultures beyond just what we call the Indian subcontinent today or India today, how his idea was actually not just restricted to here. Lord Ram was not restricted to India, but to several other cultures and several other nations. So let's begin with Thailand, for example.
It's a good example since I just mentioned it. I mean, like I said, I don't want to go too deep into the history and the archaeology of it. Okay, let's look at things as they exist. Lord Ram, Ram Rajya, such controversial topics in India and even in the West. It's not a controversial topic in Thailand. Now, Thailand is 95% Buddhist. It's not a Hindu majority country. There are less than 80,000 practicing Hindus. Most of them are the second, third generation Indians or first generation Indians who have gone there for economic migration. But when it comes to Thailand, I mean, just think about the basics. The ruling monarch of Thailand is currently King Rama the 10th. The Thai state emblem, the emblem of the state, we have the three lions of Sarnath. The emblem of the Thai state is what? Is the Garuda. Now we know the Garuda is the bird on which Vishnu used to ride. Okay, that's their state emblem. So their head of state is King Rama. Their state emblem is the Garuda. Okay, when you land in Bangkok, you land in the Swarna Bhumi. Swarna is gold, Bhumi is land. Swarna Bhumi International Airport, the golden airport, it's Sanskrit. Now, this is because Thai history is sharing its root in Indic history. Where does it come from? For the better part of 5 centuries, the main power in Thailand was the kingdom of Ayutthia.
Hmm.
Okay. Now we are talking about modern day Ayodhya. Okay. That's the kingdom of Ayutthia. So the kingdom of Ayutthia is the dominant political force in central Thailand. When it was finally defeated by Burmese invasion in 1767, and a new Thai state was created in Bangkok just a few years later in 1780s, King Rama the First, which is the royal lineage that exists today.
Hmm.
The first thing the king did was create a devasthan in Bangkok. It still exists today. One of the preeminent rites they used to have, which is the swinging ceremony, for which they've stopped doing it now, but they created a swing which is Vedic and Brahmanical tradition. In fact, Tamil scripture is still quoted when they have the coronation ceremony of the Thai kings. So there is so much relatable when it comes to Thailand, which does not require history. It requires just traveling there and you'll be looking around and going, Swarna Bhumi, I understand. Okay. Now, if you go to Bangkok, and there's a river that runs through the central Bangkok. It's called the Chao Phraya. Forgive my pronunciation of it. Okay. Now, the kingdom of Ayutthaya, which was a riverine kingdom based around this river, what were the principal cities? The principal city was Ayutthaya, okay, which is recognizable. The other city was Sompuri, okay, Lopuri, Sufanpuri. Now, if you come from Vikaspuri in Delhi, you'll totally relate, okay, because the principal three cities, and this was a kingdom when you had your travelers going through this region, they said this is one of the three most powerful kingdoms in Asia. Kingdom of Ayutthaya. Okay, it is at the same rank as Vijayanagar. It's the same rank as the Chinese Empire. These are the guys who are running this part of the world. Okay, they call themselves the Kingdom of Ayutthaya. They are worshipping whom? They are worshipping Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Parvati, Ganesh. Okay, in fact, shivlings have been found in central Thailand. That go back at least 1,000, 2,000 years. Shiv paintings have been found going back to the 12th century AD. This is the part of central Thailand. So this is uh, the very understandable culture. So if you're from South India, you would understand that you are either Shivite or Vaishnavite. It was the same. So there were Shiv paintings, Shiv temples. There were Vishnu statues, which they go back to the 4th century AD. Okay, and all the way till the 12th century AD. So for 800 years, there was a Vaishnavite culture along with the Shivite culture. So something that was very familiar to people who are living in this country, okay, were equally familiar to the people of Thailand, are still familiar, is not controversial to them. I mentioned the coronation ceremony of the Thai king. When they do the coronation ceremony, it is supervised by Brahmins. In fact, the two lineages of Brahmins. One is called the Brahma Luang, okay, the Brahmin Luang, and the Brahm Chao, okay, the royal Brahmins and the people's Brahmins. They still exist, and they still are the heads of the investiture ceremony that happens during the coronation. And what is the coronation? The coronation is coming from Thirupavai and Thiruvempavai. Now, Thirupavai and Thiruvempavai are Tamil literations of Vedic rites, and they are still quoted in the coronation ceremony that is taking place in Thailand. So, when we are talking about Indic civilization, then there are modern day people from Tamil Nadu, from Bengal, from Punjab, who are living in Thailand. Okay, what we don't understand is if you were to go to Thailand, everything would, in its nomenclature, its language, its semantics, would seem oddly familiar.
Yes.
And there is a fundamental reason it's oddly familiar. And here is a Buddhist country, I mean, almost 10% Buddhist, okay, that has King Rama. Okay, and then we have a controversy in India about King Ram. We have a controversy in the West about King Ram. Oh, Ram Rajya, something very, 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 very dubious. It is some sort of, there is Hindu unilateralism. Hindutva is happening over here. You tell that to a Thai person, and they laugh at you that King Ram is a problem because they're a Buddhist civilization. So Thailand is just one such example, which is so relatable, Devika.
And as far as relatability is concerned, Rishabh, also, of course, one has to discuss Cambodia because that's actually a very popular tourist destination anyway because of the fact that it's the home to some of the oldest Hindu temples in the world. And there's so much work that India, in fact, has done with Cambodia to ensure the restoration. There have been excavations where shivlings, centuries old shivlings, have been unearthed. So if you can, tell us a little bit
Like
about.
I said, it's so relatable, okay, just in the language of it, okay. Now, when we talk about Cambodia, Cambodia was a Shaivite Hindu place till the 4th century, 14th century AD.
Hmm.
Okay. So going back to historical tradition, till about 400-500 years ago, it was majority Shaivite Hindus. In fact, the founder of the Khmer dynasty, which is the ruling dynasty of Cambodia, what was his name? His name was Jayavarman the second. Does it sound familiar? There's a reason it sounds familiar. Okay. He gave himself the titles. Number one was Devaraja, and number two was Chakravartin. Okay, so the founder of the Khmer dynasty is his name is Jayavarman. He has called himself Devaraja and he's given himself the title Chakravartin. Okay, these are all familiar to anybody who's seen Mahabharata on TV, okay, or Ramayana on TV. They're so familiar. In the Khmer dynasty, Sanskrit was the official court language. They used to speak Sanskrit. All their official court records were written in Sanskrit. In fact, you can find Sanskrit inscriptions in Hindu temples all over Cambodia dating back to this time. Okay, so the language is familiar, the names are familiar. Most likely they were linked to the Cholas. Now, you mentioned the ancient temples, and when we think of Cambodia, the first name that comes to mind as tourist destination is what? Angkor Wat.
Angkor Wat,
Okay,
yes.
now Angkor Wat, which was built by Suryavarman, who was a descendant of the Khmer dynasty, and when he built this in the 12th century, it was a Vishnu temple. So Suryavarman, okay, built a Vishnu temple called Angkor Wat, okay, and the reason it was called Angkor because Angkor, okay, came from the word Nagara in Sanskrit, okay, Nagar, and Wat means temple, so the city of temples. It had a Sanskrit root, even the name had a Sanskrit root, okay. And when he built the temple in the 12th century, what was it called? It was called Param Vishnu Lok. Param Vishnu Lok, the grandest home of Vishnu. And that's how you know it was built as a Vishnu temple. Now, what happens is, he had a chief advisor. What was his chief advisor's name? His chief advisor's name was Divakar Pandit. Now, Divakar Pandit is somebody you and I could bump down the street and find Divakar as a common name and Pandit as a common name. So you don't have to have read your history. You could be walking on the streets and these names will be seem oddly familiar. And they are 800-900,000 years ago talking about Cambodian history. That an advisor to the king, okay, Suryavarman, by the name of Divakar Pandit, suggested that they build a grand temple to Vishnu. So they were Vaishnavites, okay. They built a temple to Vishnu. Once they built the temple to Vishnu, then of course Buddhist conversion happened. And when the Buddhist conversion happened, and this happened in 1180, okay, so you have a descendant. This guy is called Suryavarman the Fourth, okay. He's got himself a wife, okay. Guess what the wife's name was? Indra Devi. So he marries a woman called Indra Devi. She converts to Buddhism. Okay. And around the year 1180, they convert Angkor Wat and it converts from a Vishnu site, a Vishnu temple, to a Buddhist site as it is found today. In fact, just about 25 kilometers, and this, this is absolutely fascinating. Devika, there's a place in Karnataka, okay? It is called the Saharsalinga, okay? Now, the Saharsalinga is on the Shalmala river, okay? Which is a small rivulet. And on the banks of the river where the rocks are, they've carved, people have counted about 1,000 shivlings. The exact same replica can be found in a valley called Kabal Span. Forgive me for my pronunciations, okay? This is in north central Cambodia, okay? Just a few kilometers from Angkor Wat. Same riverine area, okay? Carved shivlings on the river bank. Paintings of Shiva. Paintings of the Nandi bull, okay? All things that would be so familiar to anybody traveling from India. You could instantly relate it because it's so ingrained in your civilization. And then we say Hindu, Hindu, Hindu because we don't understand it. There are only in Cambodia officially only 1,000 Hindus.
Wow. And they've still managed to retain.
It's only 1,000 because those 1,000 Hindus are the people who went recently, okay, who are still Hindus, okay. But their entire historical cultural tradition including the performance of the Ramayana that happens over there, is Indic. Okay, is because we confuse Hindu tradition, Veda. This is all Hindu. It's religion. It's India. Okay, uh, is that we get confused that there is an Indic civilization in Hinduism. Basically, refers to the peoples
Hmm.
following the pagan religion by a name given, as we've often discussed, where the name Hinduism comes from the river Indus and its corruption. The conceptualization extends. We've gone into Thailand. Now you
Hmm.
go to Cambodia. You can keep on going into Southeast Asia, and you'll see the same facts repeating themselves, Devika.
In fact, even Burma has a very interesting history.
The most significant, okay, Burma. All right. I want you to think of the name Burma. Does it sound familiar? Okay, not from Mountbatten or Burma.
Hmm.
Okay. The most significant literation of the name Burma is probably from Brahmadesh, Brahma. Okay, which when the British came and the people like Mountbatten came, the Brahma became Burma.
Burma.
Now, why does Brahma and Burma? What is the connotation? Okay. Now we let's put this in a modern context. Okay, what's happened recently? You have Myanmar they call it now. Okay, these troops have entered into India's northeast. Okay, where Manipur.
Hmm.
Okay, Manipur at this point of time, a few hundred years ago, is one of the greatest kingdoms in this part of the world. Okay, and there was a direct route of migration from Manipur into what is modern day Myanmar. Okay, if you go to Yangon, you can find the extant Shri Kali temple present over there till the beginning of the 19th century. So till the First World War. Okay, till the First World War, 55% of the population in the capital city Yangon was Hindu.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't have to go into 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. It was 1,000, 1,500, 200, 2,000 years that a Indic cultural tradition was extending, which was extant till the beginning of the 19th century. You had people from Tamil Nadu, people from Bengal, okay, obviously people from Manipur who had come there.
Hmm.
The Burmese language has its root in Sanskrit and Pali, so a lot of the word nomenclature comes from Sanskrit. Okay, there's a state which you've done discussion on, Arakan, the Arakan state. Okay,
Hmm.
what was the historic capital of Arakan called? The historic capital of Arakan, ladies and gentlemen, is such a familiar name, Ramavati. Okay, was the
Hmm.
one of the major cities of Arakan province. We've discussed is one of the Khan states in Burma right now. The second state was Dhanyavati, the second name of the second city. Okay, then in southwest Burma, southeast Burma, there was a city called Dwarvavati.
Hmm.
Dwar, door. Okay, Dwarka, Dwarvati. So you have Dhanyavati, Ramavati, Dwarvati. Okay, and the argument goes that these were principal cities that belong to a kingdom which in nomenclature can be referred to as Ramannadesh.
Hmm.
Okay, the kingdom of Ram.
Hmm.
Okay, that they followed the Manusmriti in Burma. Okay, uh, we're talking about Middle Ages, so the temple cities. Okay, forget the ones I've already mentioned, which had the names. The cities that were formed for temples. Okay, there is a major city called which hosts the Nothlong Kuang Temple. The Nothlong Kuang Temple dates back 1,000 years, so
Hmm.
probably 10th or 11th century AD. Okay, what is the temple to? The temple is to Vishnu. Okay, so another Vaishnavite tradition over here. The most famous Buddhist building is this golden stupa.
Hmm.
Okay, it's called the pagoda. Okay, and this is one of the most. In fact, the golden pagoda is supposed to where their artifacts, including 8 strands of hair of the Buddha, are supposed to be housed in this pagoda. It's most likely that this pagoda, which exists in Shwedagon, okay, that this was built on the site of a Vishnu temple dating back to before Christ. Okay, so maybe 2,000, 2,500 years ago. So Sanskrit language, court language. Look at the names of the cities.
Hmm.
Okay, look at the name of the state itself. Okay, they are look from every very natural aspect that if you were just to go through the basics, you would go, Ramanna Desh, Brahma, Burma, Dhanyavati, this all sounds oddly familiar.
Hmm.
Okay, that's because it's not a coincidence. You're talking about a large Indic civilization. Hardly any Hindus left in Burma right now. I mean, If you go back just a few decades, they were still using a lunar calendar which had derived from India.
Hmm.
So everything would be familiar to anybody from India traveling to these places and reading the basics about where these places were built from, Devika.
And another very interesting place is Indonesia. In fact, I was in Bali myself last year. So this is something that, like you said, right, you just have to go there to really understand, see it. Uh, the fact that every single house has a Ganesh Murti outside. You can go and see it there.
No, because Bali to this day is 85% Hindu.
Yes.
Okay. Now these are not Indians who went there, like in
Hmm.
Mauritius and Seychelles. Okay. These are ethnic Balinese
Hmm.
who are Hindu. They worship Ganesh to this day. They perform the Ramayana. Okay. And Diwali is a big deal from them. And when it comes, so speaking of Indonesia, I remember when I was, in school, all right, and there was this first president who became very controversial towards the end of his tenure called Sukarno.
Hmm.
And as a young boy, I found it very strange because he had a daughter and his daughter's name was Sukarno Putri.
Hmm.
Now, that can't be a coincidence. Putri means daughter, Sukarno's daughter. She
Yeah.
was literally just called Sukarno's daughter. Okay, Sukarno Putri. And
Hmm.
I'm thinking, this is odd, but you think it's odd. Yeah, it could be because, you don't pay attention to these matters. But there are, recently, a couple of years ago, there's a big conversation of, has she converted, back to Hinduism from Islam or not. Okay. The Whether that's true or untrue, there are certain members of the ruling elite in Indonesia. Okay. Even though it's one of the largest Muslim countries in the world.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, the largest Muslim country in the world.
Hmm.
The royal family of Indonesia in 2019 they were here, and what were they visiting? The temple of Jagannath Puri.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean you can read this yourself. So they're roaming around India because they still have roots. So Sukarno Putri. Okay, I mentioned the Garuda. Okay, as the symbol, as the emblem, state official emblem of Thailand. The Garuda is also in the official emblem of Indonesia.
Yes.
Okay, now that yet another coincidence. Obviously, it can't be a coincidence. No? So okay, let's get back to Bali. Okay, so the area around Bali, which is Java. Okay, you can find references to this, and you can argue that in one of the places they were hunting for Sita was Ceylon, but they were also Java. Java is only a few hundred kilometers from the
Hmm.
Andamans. Okay, so in this conversation, in about the 10th or 11th century, as the historical records go, okay, you have a king by the name of Udayan. Okay, and his name was Udayan Varma Deva.
Hmm.
Uday Varma. I mean, you could be walking around South Delhi and you would meet an Uday, you would meet a Varma, you would meet a Dev.
Hmm.
Okay, that was the founder of the kingdom that in which Bali was prospering. Okay, he had a wife, and the wife's name was Mahandaretta. Okay, Mahanretta. Okay, the by the time the Balinese kingdoms and they are waxing and waning, and by the time the end comes during about the 14th century, Majapahit is the last Hindu kingdom of this peninsula of this island region along Java. Okay, but in Java, as I mentioned, you have the epics that are talked about. The epics talk about them. You can find Shivlingas that go back to the 8th century, so at least 300 years before the Hindu kingdoms, so
Hmm.
that you know that they existed. There are cities and regions. Okay, so look at this. They in one of the premier kingdoms, which was called Kutai. Okay, they had a region by the name of Kalinga.
Yeah.
Does Kalinga sound familiar to you?
Hmm.
Okay, they had a region. This is the 4th century, so you're talking about 1500 years ago. They had a Kalinga in Java. Okay,
Hmm.
they had a Tarun Nagar in Java. Now, Tarun Nagar, do these names sound familiar? Okay, and what do they call? What do they call the Ramayana? They call it the Ram Kavaka, the Ram
Yes.
Katha. Okay, now it would be so oddly familiar, yet we don't understand it that this is an Indic civilization, and we fail to recognize it, fail to separate it. Now, here you have a Muslim majority country,
Hmm.
okay, largest Muslim country in the world, which has Indic civilizational roots. It celebrates them happily. They are not shy about their Lord Ganesha and Lord Rama and the Ramayana. We, for some reason, are very apologetic about it. It's very confusing, especially if we study the history,
In
Devika.
fact, in in Bali, Rishabh, when you go, there are so many statues of so many characters from the Mahabharata as well. And my mom was also in Bali, and she in fact shared this with me. There was a statue of two brothers, and she couldn't quite figure it out. So she asked the taxi driver, and he said, "Oh, this is the Pandavas, Nakul and Sahadev."
you
And
know
my mom said, "Okay, we for us the Mahabharata usually ends at Arjun, and here there are
I mean,
people."
certainly you won't be making statues of Nakul and Sahadev. Not many people would have it in their houses here, but you will
Exactly.
find them in the houses of Bali. So, like I said, we have just become so disconnected with just what is living. This is right now. This is not necessarily history. It is living and
Yes.
breathing, so relatable in the names, in the nomenclature, in the places. That would be so recognizable to anyone. It doesn't stop there. You can keep on going all the way down to Malaysia, and it will all be the same, Devika.
Absolutely. And of course, one other country, Rishabh, that becomes very interesting. And again, it's a very popular destination, tourist destination for Indians, but I'm not sure how much of our own history and how much of our own culture we actually end up finding there and identifying there. I'm talking about Vietnam.
Okay, so when we think of Vietnam, the first thing and only thing that probably comes to mind currently is probably a holiday.
Hmm.
Before that is probably the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Okay, uh, what doesn't come to mind is that the ruling kingdom of Vietnam from the 2nd century AD all the way up till the 19th century, which is 18 something,
Hmm.
was the kingdom called the Champa dynasty.
Hmm.
Does Champa sound familiar to you? Okay, maybe it should. It comes from the vernacular, which is very much Indian. Okay, they have found 7th century Shivlinga. So these are Shaivites. Okay. Very recently, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, I think this was about a year or so ago, in a region called Maison, this is in the Quang Nam province, they discovered this 11th century massive Shivling. Okay, and he said, okay, and Jaishankar commented on this that it speaks about long cultural traditions. Now, for the better part of 1800 years, the ruling dynasty is the Champa dynasty. Their court language and the royals themselves speak Sanskrit. Okay. What are their capitals called? Their capitals are called Simhapur. Their capitals are called Virapur. Their capital is called Indrapur and their capital is called Vijaya. So once again repeat. These are the names of their capitals.
Hmm.
Simhapur, Virapur, Indrapur, Vijay. Okay. Are these familiar names? Would an Indian find these familiar? You would find them. We all know Vijay means. Okay, it's victory. Okay, and
Hmm.
that's the name of the capital. And this is all the way going back from the 5th, 6th century all the way till the 14th, 15th century. These were the capitals. This is the capital city of the Kingdom of Vietnam. Is called Vijay. It's called Indrapur. Okay. In fact, Devika, the descendants, the ethnic Cham people. Okay, the descendants qualify in modern day anthropology, okay, as one of the very few non Indian ethnic Hindus. They are still practicing Hindus,
Hmm.
but they have their own independent Hindu history dating back to 2,500 years. So they are non Indian ethnic Hindus, okay. So these are people who look nothing like you and me,
Hmm.
okay, who have a completely different ethnic history, geographical background, far away from what we traditionally call India, and they are Hindus, okay? And nobody is telling them to fear Ram Rajya and Hindutva rise and this dies, okay? So now there was they had a neighboring kingdom, okay, the Champas called Funan. We're going back to the 4th century AD, wherever Hinduism came from, okay? And these areas had temples, they
Hmm.
had brick temples, okay? In fact, Mysore, which is where the Shivalinga was discovered, okay, was a religious center during this time.
Yes.
It was one of the main port cities of this of the Champa kingdom, okay, and today it's a World Heritage Site.
Yes.
Okay, so the Champa kingdom, which is which is a kingdom which is official language is Sanskrit, whose capital is Indrapura, okay, whose leaders are Hindus, who have progenited the only other ethnic Hindu civilization in the world. Today, these people, okay, are interlinked in an Indic civilization. And we can discuss this as we go forward into Laos. You can have the same conversation in Malaysia, okay. So Devika, the sum total of really all of this is, and we have to open our minds,
Hmm.
okay. And there are 2 points I want to make here, which is where we began. Number one, look, in a fundamental sense, when we talk about Hinduism, we as Indian Hindus have no idea. Okay. When we talk about a Hindu diaspora, we are talking about Rishi Sunak.
Hmm.
Okay. Literally, whose wife is Narayan Murthy's daughter. Okay. We are talking about maybe one generation removed, two
Hmm.
generations removed, three generations removed. At best, you're talking about Mauritius and Seychelles, 100 years removed. Okay, this is what we understand as Indian diaspora. Okay, OIC. Okay, what is it? PIO card. Okay, and uh, NRI. Okay, what we don't comprehend is the swath of Indic civilization. Okay, because most of these countries
Hmm.
come from an Indic root, which they are very proud of. Heck, that's there in their emblems. Many of these countries are now Buddhist majority, and we all know where Buddhism originates from.
Yes.
Okay. Even in the countries where have very little practicing Hindus left, they are praying to Ganesha, they call their king Rama, they perform the Ramayana, they celebrate Diwali. Okay. All their semantics, their language, their names, their rulers, their kingdoms, their capital cities are all familiar nomenclature for Indians. Okay. And yet we seem to think that the only Indic diaspora is Indians who went abroad
Yes.
a couple of decades ago. So our thought process has to change, and if it changes, then the what we understand in terms of Hindu
Hmm.
changes. What we understand when people say that Ram Rajya, if you went and told the Thai people that there is a concept called Ram Rajya, they would say yes, absolutely. Okay, we are a Buddhist state, but we totally get it. But if you say Ram Rajya in India, okay, oh my God,
Hmm.
it's a very controversial. It's seen as far right. So we have just lost context so badly, and we had this look east policy, and I would recommend to a lot of people listening to this podcast. Just imagine something that is so familiar to anybody who's had an Indian upbringing.
Hmm.
Okay, doesn't realize that the Vietnamese, the Thai, the Cambodians, the people from Laos, from Java, from large parts of Indonesia, parts of Malaysia, from Brahma, okay, have all had similar civilizational roots.
Yes.
And that is something that is so wondrous and so eye opening and requires so much more conversation, research, writing. And I'm hoping it happens. And I'm hoping people watching this take it forward.
Absolutely. And Rishabh, one last thing. How do you think, is there something that we can then perhaps learn from these civilizations? Because, like you said, there's something has probably gone wrong with us here in, has it been our inability to sort of really understand our true values and go deep into the history of our culture, which is something that probably some of these nations have managed to do, and therefore the concept of a Ram Rajya is not threatening to these
I've had
civilizations.
this conversation on TV several times. Okay, so when you look at the Arthurian model, okay, Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, okay, and this is a chivalric order. It is rooted in Christianity, rooted in in the Knights Templar logic of what a knight is. Okay,
Hmm.
but when you talk about King Arthur, okay, you're talking about chivalry and justice and fairness, and they sit on a round table, so there's it's equality
Hmm.
amongst peers. Uh, you take the Christian context as default. Uh, but you're looking at the good things coming from it. Similarly, when you should talk about Ram Rajya, you rather than taking the fairness and jurisprudence and Dhamma, as Ashoka would say, the concept of Dhamma, okay, a fair world, a just world. Instead of looking at that, you look at it in a religious context. So we have these failings, and these failings are primarily because we have just lost touch with who we are. Now you can blame the British.
Hmm.
Okay, you can blame the Lord Macaulay and company who tried to say that when we'll talk like Englishmen, dress like Englishmen. You can see over here. Okay, uh, and they'll make you forget who you are.
Hmm.
I've always held the belief that as you see the troubles that are taking place in Jerusalem right now, in Gaza right now, okay, and the other ails that happen in the world, the founding of the great countries of today, the United States of America. We know how the country was founded by colonizers and what they did to the Native Americans.
Hmm.
Okay, it was genocide. You wiped out a ethnic civilization. Okay, and replace them with people who came in mostly from the UK.
Yes.
Uh, the practicing Hindus in the US, 2-3%, Muslims 4-5%. Okay, so it's you think, oh, New York so cosmopolitan, but in reality the country isn't. Okay, the same can apply to London. The city is so cosmopolitan. In reality, no, not so much. So when you look at the sheer scale of what India is,
Hmm.
the historicity of it, the wonder that is, as Basham wrote the book on, okay, uh, then you expand the concept of things that are so natural in so many parts of Southeast Asia, but are so complexly virulent in our own country. The birthplace of Lord Ram, Ayodhya, I mean, it's such a massive issue in this country for so many decades.
Yeah.
Okay, why was it an issue? Okay, they literally made another city called Ayutthia in Thailand, uh, uh, dedicated to Lord Rama.
Hmm.
But in India, in the original Ayodhya, we had a huge problem discussing Rama, let alone build the temple. So, if we were to look at the hope of the world
Hmm.
in finding out how can very complex, diverse peoples live together in peace and equanimity. Okay, look at India. No Jewish persecution. We didn't start the jihad. We didn't start the crusades. We didn't start the First World War. Okay, we didn't start the Second World War. Okay, we have a civilizational route going past 5-6,000 years, maybe more. You have a large civilizational footprint which
Hmm.
was readily embraced by people who were not ethnic from this particular part of the subcontinent. Okay, as we just discussed. So, if we were to study this, the hope of humanity is to be found in the study of this. How do we all get along better? You never had a Jewish persecution in India. India became host to the last of the Persians, the Zoroastrians, and the Parsi community here in India. We have 200 million Muslims living in this country. We
Hmm.
have a large Christian population. We are the birthplace of Sikhism, of Buddhism, okay, which have happened in the last 2 centuries. So they're in the last 2 millennia. So they're well documented. Hinduism, of course, origination you can't document as as a pagan religion of the old. So there's something wonderful here.
Hmm.
And I'm hoping that through this conversation you've discovered that the Thai, the Vietnamese, the Cambodians, the Indonesians, the Balinese, they all share it, and it's part of their history and culture and who they are. It's not imposed, and they're not scared of it. They don't fear it. They don't call it Hindu right wingism. That's how they live.
Well, Rishabh, thank you so much. That's all the time that we have, but we hope that at least uh, it's been an educative exercise for people who are watching this, but at the same time, maybe it's going to push you to plan your next holidays around in Southeast Asia or one of these countries that we've discussed so that you can actually go there and see what we're talking about. Thank you so much for watching this episode.